Okay. So I've just started recording it. Again, my name is Michael Grix. I'm the Chief Elections Clerk from Macomb County. And on behalf of Fred Miller, our Macomb County Clerk and Register of Deeds, we want to thank you all for being here. And we appreciate your patience as we get everything going in from the technological aspect for the first time. Again, I'm going to try and take attendance at the end of the meeting once we have everybody signed in. So please don't leave the meeting, even after I end it or say we're all done. Please don't leave the meeting until I let you know, because I'd hate for you to sit through this and not get credit for it. The first question that I would assume is on a lot of people's minds is, what are the precincts going to look like in this day and age with everything going on with COVID? Each precinct is obviously under the direction of your respective city or township clerks. The precinct, we are still going to have in-person voting. That's a very common question that we get. The number of absentee ballots that have been requested and sent out for this election is sky high compared to previous elections. So we're seeing a significant number of AB voters. We do expect that that will mean less voters in the precinct on election day. However, we don't know that. So we need to be prepared for anything. The Bureau of Elections has provided to us, the county, and we in turn have supplied your city and township clerks with a number of PPE items, specifically gloves, masks, face shields, hand sanitizer, and disinfectant spray, I believe is the other one. Any other items that your clerks may have purchased on their own or with some kind of grant money will be up to them. So I would advise you to, whatever your local clerk tells you or provides for you. The county, we at the county give kind of a broad general training. The specifics of election day, where you're supposed to go, where you're supposed to pick up your things, what time you're supposed to show up, what precinct you're assigned to, all of those specific items that are specific to each individual or individual to each precinct. Your local clerk should be getting in touch with you about that. So I can't tell you exactly what it's going to look like for each individual precinct, but there will be some personal protection equipment provided for you, because our goal and the goal of your local clerks is to obviously run a smooth and fair election with the safety of everybody, the workers and the voters, in mind. The election this August is a primary election. I'm assuming, usually I ask this question and look for a raise of hands just because it's nice to know when we're doing this in person, but I'll assume we have some workers who have worked previous elections and some who are doing this for the first time. So the August 4th election is going to be a primary election. In Michigan, we have an open primary. That means Republicans and Democrats will be on the ballot in two separate columns, but on the same physical ballot, along with any nonpartisan candidates and proposals, if there may be. Something to be aware of, and we'll get to it later in the training, but the biggest thing that you're going to see as an inspector could be, I guess I won't say you will see it, but is spoiled ballots because of crossovers. We'll likely get this question a lot, and it's something to look out for. In Michigan, voters have to choose which party's primary, Republican or Democrat, or neither if they so choose, but have to choose which party's primary they're going to participate in. They can do so in the privacy of the voting booth. They don't have to declare a party affiliation or anything like that. But if they attempt to vote for a Republican for one race and a Democrat for another, and a Republican for a different one, and then a Democrat for a different race, they're going to have their ballot be rejected by the tabulator, and more likely than not, they're going to want to spoil it and revote. So just be aware of that. Anybody who's worked a primary election before is probably familiar with that. In an even year August primary, you also have to deal with and take care of precinct delegates. It's an office that is printed on the ballot just like any other office. However, the additional obligation that falls on election inspectors is that precinct delegate is the one office that a candidate has an option to file a write-in declaration of intent with the precinct board on election day. There will be pieces of paper in your precinct kits called a precinct delegate write-in declaration of intent. They have the option to file that ahead of time with my office, and if they don't do so by the deadline, which is this Friday, they have the option to file it in the precinct on election day with the precinct board. So if someone chooses to do that, please be aware that they do have the right to do so. You would look at their write-in declaration of intent, make sure it's filled out completely, but basically if there's a box or a line, they need to put something in it. At the very least, their name, their address, what it is they're running for, their precinct number, they need to sign it. You as the precinct chairperson and as members of the precinct board, you'll notice at the bottom of the form, it says that it needs to be notarized. It does not need to be notarized. It simply needs to be acknowledged. The precinct chairperson can do that, and you need to look them up to make sure that they are indeed a registered voter in that precinct. In terms of the canvassing of those votes, anybody whose name is already printed on the ballot for precinct delegate will have their votes recorded by the tabulator and print out on the results tape, just like any other office. Write-in candidates will need to be recorded separately. The write-in report will print out at the end of the night, just like it always does. And for any valid write-in candidates, you need to record those names in the poll book. For anybody working on an AV counting board, there is a separate piece of paper that you'll use that your clerks have in their precinct kit, depending on the type of AV equipment you're using. Most of the, well, I'll get into that with your clerks, don't worry about it. The last thing that I wanted to touch on before we get into the videos by the Bureau of Election is, as anybody who has worked the last few elections knows, and for anybody who's working for the first time, please be aware Michigan, ever since it was approved in November of 2018, Michigan now allows for election day registration. So if somebody shows up in the precinct, had they shown up in the precinct prior to November of 18, you had to have been registered to vote 30 days before the election to be eligible to vote in it. That is not the case anymore. Somebody can show up in the precinct, and if they are not registered to vote, they can register that day and vote that day. They cannot register with you in the precinct. You have absolutely no authority to accept those. Do not do so. If somebody wants to register to vote on election day, you need to direct them to go to their city or township clerk's office, and they will register to vote there with the city and township clerk. They have the option to vote an absentee ballot, or they can be issued a receipt by the local clerk following registration. Bring that to you at the precinct board, and that is your proof that they did indeed register to vote, and they should be allowed to vote a ballot. If they don't have that receipt, you have no proof that they may tell you they registered to vote, but you have no proof that they actually did so. So they have to bring that receipt back to you if they wish to register to vote on election day. Okay, so before we jump into the videos, those were kind of the announcements I wanted to make. If anybody has any questions at this time, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. There is also a chat function. One of the options down at the bottom of your screen, one of the circular buttons is chat. It'll bring up a chat box on the right-hand side of the screen. You can also do that to ask your question if you want. I'll wait a moment to give anybody a chance if they want to ask a question.
Do we keep those receipts if they register that day? Are those receipts filed with all the poll book and everything?
That's a good question. I don't actually know.
Or do they keep the receipt themselves?
I think they kept the receipts when I
If
had.
any, if any of the clerks or other inspectors who've gone through this are on the call, does anybody know the answer to that question? I don't actually.
I actually had that happen back when in March, and I just gave them the receipt back. They just had to prove it that they did register with the clerk, and then I just gave them that receipt back.
Okay.
I believe that's what I did.
I think that's a fair answer. I can't think of a reason why you would need to keep it. They do need to present it to you so that you can be assured that they did indeed register. Whoever is working the electronic poll book would need to list the person, add them as a registered voter so that you can assign them a ballot, but I don't believe you need to keep that receipt as proof that they did register to vote. We're relying on you as the election inspectors to not add the person to the poll list and not issue them a ballot if they don't indeed have, if they don't have that receipt, if they did not register properly. So that's a fair answer. Thank you to whoever that was. I see another question on the chat about are voters required to wear masks? That is a good question. The governor's executive order strongly encourages it, but does not require it for voters. Clerks have been advised to try and have extra masks on hand to give to voters who don't bring their own. But ultimately, if the voter refuses to wear a mask, they cannot be denied the ability to vote. They cannot be denied access to the polling place.
Michael, on that question on the mask, if we are looking at their ID, are we allowed to ask them to remove their mask to see their whole face?
If necessary, yes, that was, I believe, hold on one quick second. I think that was actually addressed. I believe the answer is yes. However, I want to try and find out for sure. I believe you do have the right to ask someone to momentarily lower their face covering, their mask, for purposes of trying to verify their identity through the picture ID, if that's necessary. If you can do so without having them lower their mask, that's fine. I will actually research that question and send the answer out to the clerks, but I believe the answer is yes. But I'll make a note and research that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
On the registration on the day of the election, is the clerk's job then to certify that this person isn't already registered somewhere else?
Yes. When the person goes to the clerk's office to register to vote, our database, the Michigan Qualified Voter Database, one of the things that they will look up is to make sure to see if they are currently registered to vote somewhere else, and if they have indeed voted that day, to make sure you're not voting twice. And the system is also set up to prevent them from registering more than once on election day. So for example, if somebody registers in Lenox Township at 10 a.m., gets issued a receipt, goes and votes at Lenox Township, and then tries to register in Shelby Township at noon and vote again, the system will stop them. Someone's only allowed to register once on election day.
Okay, so we've got the receipts, the certification that's been done. So
Yes, there are safeguards in place to prevent exactly that from happening.
good.
Any other questions?
Are you there?
Yes, did you have a question?
Talking to you.
Connection.
Asking. It's on Tuesday.
Okay. Are there any other questions before we start the videos? Okay. So what we're going to do is watch some videos and then take a moment to talk about them afterwards. And if we have questions that come up as a result of them, well, then we'll take care of it at that point. I'm going to share my screen and then turn on the first video. Okay. I'll pause that for a quick second. So this one is a video that's put together by Election Systems and Software specifically about our voting equipment, just to familiarize you with that if you haven't used it before. And then the rest of the videos will be about various voting procedures from the Michigan Bureau of Elections.
Election Systems and Software presents operating the DS200 on Election Day. Step 1. Plug it in and lock it down. Access the back panel of the DS200. Using the flat key, unlock the back panel of the DS200. Lock the silver bar into place. This step is critical because it opens the door that allows ballots to pass from the scanner to the ballot bin. If this step is not performed, a ballot jam will occur. Pull the power cord from its storage area. The power cord must be on top of the silver bar, not under it. Ensure the power cord is plugged securely into the power adapter, black box, strapped into the bin. Plug the power cord into an approved power strip surge protector. Then plug the power strip surge protector into a 110-volt electric outlet. Position the DS200 as it will be utilized during Election Day, then lock the front wheels. Step 2. Open the ballot bin and clear the auxiliary bin. Using the flat key, open the bottom storage area of the DS200 box and remove the blue ballot bin. Unlock the blue ballot bin and remove any contents. Shut the flaps of the ballot bin and slide it back into the bottom storage area of the ballot box. After the blue ballot bin is back in the ballot box, reopen the flaps of the blue ballot bin. This step is critical to allow scanned ballots to be deposited into the ballot bin. If this step is missed, ballot jams may occur. Lock the door to the bottom storage area. Using the flat key, unlock the auxiliary bin. Open the bin and ensure nothing is in the bin. The silver shutter of the bin should remain in the closed position during normal operation of the DS200. Step 3. Open and start the DS200. Using the flat key, unlock the lid of the ballot box. Undo both latches and open the ballot box lid. Using the barrel key, unlock the DS200 display and raise it to the open position. If the DS200 has electricity, it will automatically start upon opening the display. If the DS200 does not start, close the DS200 display, recheck all of the power connections, then reopen the display. If the DS200 still does not start when raising the display after rechecking the power connections, contact your election office. Upon a successful boot up, the DS200 configuration report will print. When the report has finished printing, the open poll screen will appear. If the public count has a number other than 0 prior to scanning any ballots, contact your election office before opening the poll. If the public count is 0 and you are ready to begin accepting voted ballots, click the Open Poll button on the screen. The ballot status accounting and zero totals reports will print. If the reports fail to print or you require other copies, push the Report Options button and select the report you wish to print. If you are ready to permit voters to cast their ballots, press the Go to Voting Mode button. Step 4. Scanning ballots and express vote cards. Ballots can be scanned from any lengthwise orientation, right side up, upside down, top first, or bottom first. If the DS-200 detects an overvote, undervote, or blank ballot, the voter can be notified with the option of returning the uncounted ballot or casting the ballot as is. The DS-200 also scans express vote cards. As with ballots, the express vote cards can be fed into the DS-200 in any lengthwise orientation. Express vote cards should be fed into the DS-200 using the express vote card guide to ensure the card is fed properly. Once a vote ballot or express vote card is
I really want to see what
deposited
happens.
into the ballot bin, the public count total increases by 1, and the voter will see notification of successful casting of the ballot. The system is ready for the next voter. Step 5. Utilizing the auxiliary bin. If the DS-200 should stop functioning, the auxiliary bin can be opened to accept voters' marked ballots for processing at a later time. To open the auxiliary bin, first unlock the bin with the flat key. Once the door is open, the shutter door of the auxiliary bin can be flipped down to allow insertion of marked ballots. Ballots inserted into the auxiliary bin have not been counted and need to be processed according to your jurisdiction's laws once the DS-200 is functioning normally. Step 6. Closing the DS-200 at the end of election day. Open the auxiliary bin using the flat key and ensure there are not any ballots in the tray. If there are not any ballots in the tray, close and lock the auxiliary bin door. If there are ballots in the tray, follow your jurisdiction's procedures for processing uncounted ballots. After all voted ballots have been processed, unlock and open the media access panel using the barrel key. Press the Close Poll button inside of the media access panel. When you press the Close Polls button, it will turn red. When it turns off, release the button. After a few seconds, the Close Polls screen will appear. If you are certain that all voted ballots have been counted, push the Close Poll button. If your election is programmed to automatically modem election results, the Begin Modem screen will appear. Press Begin Modem Process button to start transferring election results. The scanner will attempt to connect to the server. Once the DS-200 connects to the server, it will show that you are connected. When the results have been successfully sent, press the OK button. If the DS-200 fails to connect to the server, it will automatically retry to connect 3 times. If the DS-200 does not connect with the server on the 3rd attempt, a dial error screen will appear. Press the Ignore and Continue button. The failed results screen will appear. You can either retry to send results or exit. After the results have been successfully sent, or if you had to exit the modem process without sending the results, the Finish screen will appear. Press the Finished Turn Off button to shut down the machine. If your jurisdiction requires you to remove the USB stick from the media access panel, you must wait until the machine has completely powered down before removing the stick. Removing the USB stick prior to the system powering down may damage the machine or USB stick. After the machine has completely powered down, whether or not you have removed the USB stick, close and lock the media access panel. Close and lock the DS-200 display. Close, latch, and lock the DS-200 ballot box lid. Clear the auxiliary bin one final time. Unlock the bottom storage area and remove the blue ballot bin. Lock the blue ballot bin with all of the voted ballots inside. Close and lock the bottom storage area. Unplug the machine. Wrap and store the power cord. Then lock the back panel. Return the blue ballot bin, USB stick, and all printed reports in accordance with your jurisdiction's laws. Congratulations, you have finished operating the DS-200 on election day.
Okay. One thing I did want to point out about that, not all communities use the blue bin. Some communities do, some communities don't. The ones who don't, the ballots will just fall into the bin itself, and then you'll gather them up after or at the end of election day and put them into your approved ballot container. So any questions that anybody has about that video, feel free to unmute yourself and ask. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one. Oh, I'm going to turn on the chat or look at the chat as well. Okay. If there's no questions, we'll.
I have a question.
Yes.
Are you going to have a, how can I say it? A piece of paper telling us exactly what to do step by step for that machine?
That is something that you'll have to ask your local clerk. Exactly what they provide you on election day, I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. The rest of the videos that we're going to watch are part of the Bureau of Elections YouTube channel. You're certainly welcome if you ever, have nothing else to do. These are all public on the internet. You can watch them yourself, but we found them to be a pretty good training tool. So the first one that we'll watch is about opening the polls.
Opening the polls.
Oops.
Polls open at 7 a.m. on election day. Before voters start voting at 7 a.m., there are several key tasks to complete. First, the chairperson was not sworn in prior to election day, and the election inspector should administer the chairperson oath found in the front of the poll book. Both the chairperson and the person administering the oath should sign. Next, the chairperson should give the oath to all election inspectors. Once everyone has been sworn in, it's time to prepare the polling place. Some local clerks can prepare a polling place before an election more than others. Your tasks may vary. Remember, a minimum of 3 inspectors must be present at all times, with at least 1 from each major political party. Precinct setup is important. Ensure tables and chairs and the stations they represent are placed in a manner that allows for an orderly flow through the process and include the appropriate supplies. When possible, we recommend using one door to enter, setting up tables in a U shape, and having voters exit out a different door. Generally, the first station a voter goes to is one where they can complete the application to vote. Make sure this station is the logical first step for the voter and has applications to vote and pens. The next station should be the e-poll book and ballot issuance station. Make sure the e-poll book is set up so it can be plugged in all day and ensure the cord is not a tripping hazard. Use the EPB Election Inspector Manual to properly prepare the laptop for use. Ballots, secrecy sleeves, demonstration pads are necessary supplies. The voting booths and voter assist terminal should be set up in a manner that ensures voter privacy. There should always be at least one sit-down booth for voters, in addition to the voter assist terminal. Each booth should have a blue or black ink pen for voter use and be checked throughout the day to verify no campaign material is left behind. A station that is near the tabulator should also be set up to collect secrecy sleeves and keep the rejected ballot scripts within easy reach. Don't forget the I voted stickers. A public area should also be set up. This provides a place for observation without disrupting the process. If using the U-shaped setup, the top of the U is a good place for the public area. Some jurisdictions also utilize a help desk or greeting station. Follow instructions from your local clerk. Many things need to be displayed in the precinct and easily visible to voters. They include the flag of the United States inside or outside, vote here direction signage, including clearly marking the accessible entrance and path, sample ballots, 2 Election Day voter information posters, proposal language posters when applicable. Preparing the electronic equipment for use. There are 3 types of voting equipment used throughout the state. Please consult the appropriate manuals for detailed opening instructions. When preparing the tabulator and voter assist terminal for use, the following must be completed. 1. Verify the serial and seal numbers on the equipment, the clerk's preparation certificate on the front of the poll book. When completing this step, you are ensuring nothing has happened to the equipment. The Election Commission completed the public accuracy test. 2. Complete all preparation steps required of the equipment. If any issues are encountered, contact your local clerk immediately. It's important to note that every tabulator has an emergency bin. In the event of a tabulator failure, voting should continue. Open the emergency bin and have voters deposit their voted ballots inside. 3. Compare a sample ballot with the tabulator zero tape. Verify you have the correct precinct. All candidates' names appear on both the tape and the ballot. Vote totals on the tape are all zeros. Zero tape should not be removed from the machine. It should be signed by all election inspectors present. If any issues are encountered, contact your clerk immediately. Once all these steps are complete, sign the certifying preparation certificate in the poll book. At 7 a.m., announce the opening of the polls by declaring the polls are now open. Thank you for watching.
Okay,
I have a
any
question.
questions?
Yeah, I
Any
have a
questions
question.
about that video?
If with what's going on right now with COVID, what about sterilization, 6 foot apart, pen use, etc., etc.? will that be addressed, or do you know what's going to happen with regarding to that?
That's a great question. Those issues should be addressed by your local clerk, the city or township clerk who hired you. Social distancing should be enforced to whatever extent possible. We understand that not all precincts are perfectly laid out such to allow it, but to whatever extent possible, yes. Sanitation of any shared surfaces, pens, voting booths, things like that, yes, should be sanitized as much as possible throughout the day. But I will leave that to your local clerks to tell you exactly what they want you to do and when they want you to do it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay.
Instruct the voter to complete the application. Processing voters. As the voter enters the polling location, instruct the voter to complete the application. Ask the voter if he or she has photo ID. The following types of photo ID qualify as acceptable: driver's license or personal identification card issued by Michigan or another state, federal or state government issued photo identification, U.S. passport, military identification card with photo, student identification with photo from a high school or an accredited institution of higher education, tribal identification card with photo. If a voter does not have valid photo ID in his or her possession at the polls, that voter is still welcome to vote under Michigan law. These voters simply have to sign a separate affidavit attesting to their identity, and their ballots are tabulated. When using electronic ballot, swipe the voter's
Got a really bad audio.
or type the voter's name into the appropriate to find the vote. Verifying in the poll book is the same as what the voter has indicated.
Can't hear it.
To vote. If you have a split precinct,
Okay. Yeah, somebody said that I heard you can't hear it, and I heard it's bad audio, which is
It's coming and going.
it's coming and going.
You get about a sentence really good, and then it all breaks up, and then it comes back again.
Okay.
Bandwidth problem.
Okay, I appreciate that.
It might be prioritizing people that are not on mute.
Yeah, well, I was just gonna press the wrong button. As soon as that goes away, I'm going to mute everybody. My guess is that, as somebody said, the program by default will kind of switch to whoever is talking. So even if you're not, is it still working? Even if you're not talking, it might be picking up your audio and prioritizing it over mine. So as soon, hold on.
I forgot to unmute myself.
Hold on just a moment. All right. Can people still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Something's going on with my computer. I don't know exactly what's going on, but I might have to, if I can't get this to fire back up, I might have to close the training and then have everybody log back in. I'm not quite sure what's going on. If that is the case, you should be able to log back into using the same method you did before. but give me a moment. I want to see if I can get this going. Okay. So I believe. Oh, good. All right. So it looks like everybody's still here. I had to leave the meeting and come back, but it looks like everything is back where it was. I'm going to mute everybody. My guess is that with the audio breaking in and out, it was picking up somebody else's machine, even if you weren't talking. If there was any kind of background noise, it may have been grabbing that for whatever reason. So if you, everybody is muted right now, if you can please leave yourself muted, and if you unmute yourself to ask a question, please mute yourself after you're done.
Processing voters. As the voter enters the polling location, greet the voter and instruct the voter how to complete the application to vote. Ask the voter if he or she has photo ID.
I don't believe you're sharing the screen. Sorry.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just realized I hadn't shared my screen. Hold on one moment. Can I not share my screen? No, what's going on? Why can I not share my screen? There we go. Okay. Okay. All right. Can everybody see my screen now?
It's small. It's not full screen.
Okay. All right. I appreciate that. I'll make it full screen.
As the voter enters the polling location, greet the voter and instruct the voter how to complete the application to vote. Ask the voter if he or she has photo ID. The following types of photo ID qualify as acceptable: driver's license or personal identification card issued by Michigan or another state, federal or state government issued photo identification, U.S. passport, military identification card with photo, student identification with photo from a high school or an accredited institution of higher education, tribal identification card with photo. If a voter does not have valid photo ID in his or her possession at the polls, that voter is still welcome to vote under Michigan law. These voters simply have to sign a separate affidavit attesting to their identity, and their ballots are tabulated normally. When using the electronic poll vote, swipe the voter's driver's license or type the voter's name into the appropriate field to find the voter's record. Verify that the information in the poll book is the same as what the voter has indicated to vote. If you have a split precinct, this is the time to confirm which ballot style the voter should receive and communicate that to the ballot station inspector. If the voter's information is not correct or a status flag is found next to the voter's name in the take the necessary steps to ensure the voter is eligible for a ballot. Then ask the election inspector at the ballot station what the next ballot number is and enter it into the election inspector at the ballot station completes the inspector portion of the application to vote, including the ballot number and voter number. The election inspector gives the voter the ballot in a secrecy slip and the application to vote. Make sure a booth is available for the voter and provide the voter with brief instructions on how to properly mark the ballot. An election inspector should be waiting between the voting booths and the tabulator. This election inspector should be at least 10 feet from the tabulator. For each voter, verify that the ballot number listed on the application to vote is the same ballot number the voter presents to you. Then remove the ballot stub from the ballot and instruct the voter on how to insert the ballot into the tabulator. It's very important to ensure the privacy of the voter's ballot at all times. If the tabulator rejects the voter's ballot for any reason, be prepared to assist the voter and explain how the voter can correct any errors. Campaigning. All campaigning on election day must be at a minimum of 100 feet away from any doorway used by voters.
Okay. Sorry about that. Took a second for my computer to catch up. I saw one comment that it sounded like there was still an open mic anywhere, or there was still an open audio source on somebody's computer. Was that any better? A little better?
It was better, but this one was the processing voters video.
Yes, correct.
All right, I think we probably ought to just rewatch that individually. I think it wasn't, the way it was going in and out sounded more like an electronic problem than an open mic problem.
Okay. Okay, I appreciate that. I will do my best to try and keep everybody muted. If you can also, everybody check your own mute button. I believe everyone's muted, and like I said, I'll check as well. But again, the circular buttons down at the bottom of your screen, there's one that looks like a microphone. It should be red to show that you're muted. If everybody can please do that. And we'll just, it's I guess both the good and bad of this type of medium, but we'll just have to do our best. So if anybody does want to go back and watch the processing voters video, if you go to YouTube and search Michigan Bureau of Elections, as you see at the top of my screen, all of their videos will come up. Does anybody, I know the audio was kind of in and out, but does anybody have any questions about the processing voters video? Okay, then we will try and make sure everybody's muted. Okay. Okay, I think we're good. Then we'll go on to campaign.
To enter the bill. Campaigning. All campaigning on election day must be at a minimum of 100 feet away from any doorway used by voters to enter the building in which the polling place is located. Campaigning includes displaying pro and con information on the proposals appearing on the ballot, approaching voters to encourage them to vote for or against a candidate or ballot question, distributing any type of campaign literature or write-in stickers, displaying signs, posters, or bumper stickers, or wearing campaign apparel, attempting to collect petition signatures, requesting donations, selling tickets, or engaging in similar activities. Ask voters to conceal any campaign materials they bring into the precinct and check the voting booths throughout the day to make sure a voter has not left campaign material behind. Candidates may only enter a precinct to vote during voting hours, and voters with bumper stickers may park within the 100-foot boundary only while voting. If a person persists in violating any of the above restrictions, contact the clerk or, if necessary, local law enforcement authorities.
Hold on, sorry about that. That's one.
Polling place.
Okay.
Voting
Whoops,
application.
stop that. Okay. Any questions? And I'll pull back up the chat. Any questions about that video? There was one about if the clerk's office will have a tabulator laptop if we wish to practice. You'll have to contact your local clerk about that. We do allow and encourage local clerks to give their own training in addition to this one, where they can give you the chance to, use a laptop or a tabulator to, touch and manipulate and learn everything there is to know about the equipment. But that is something your local clerk would have to arrange. If that's something you're interested in, I would encourage you to contact your local clerk and say, hey, I'd like to practice on whatever, and see what they say. I would think that they would do everything in their power to make those arrangements for you, because it's in their best interest and all of our best interests that the election workers are as comfortable and knowledgeable as possible. Any other questions? Okay, I'm going to skip the video about polling place greeting application, because that is something that not all clerks, actually, I'm not aware of a whole lot of clerks who use that. So we'll go on to voters who have moved.
Voters who have moved. As part of a voter's registration check, election inspectors should review the address on the voter's application to vote with the address in the electronic poll book or QBF precinct list. If the address provided by the voter does not match their voter registration address, review the address to determine if it is in your jurisdiction. If the address provided by the voter is within the jurisdiction, simply ask the voter to complete an election day change of address form while you issue a regular ballot. The change of address form will be used to update their address after the election. If the voter provided address is outside of the jurisdiction, ask the voter to complete an authorization to cancel registration form. As they complete the form, ask them when they moved to the new address. If the move was within 60 days of the election, you can issue the voter a regular ballot. If the move was more than 60 days prior to the election, the voter is ineligible for that election. Let the voter know they should re-register at their new address.
Okay. Now that video is still, am I recording this? Oh, good. That video is still accurate. However, that video was created before Proposal 18.3 went into effect. So if you have someone who shows up at your polling place and is not registered and they say, oh, I just moved here, or they put down a different address, or I just recently moved, something like that, they have the ability to follow all of the guidelines in that video, but most likely what they're going to want to do is to go to their local city or township clerk's office and re-register in the proper precinct. If they've moved, they want to vote where they're registered, not where they were previously registered. So while they might have that option in some instances, 9 times out of 10, they're going to, if you tell them you can go register today at your new city or township clerk's office and you can vote today, you can vote an absentee ballot, or you can come back here to the precinct and vote in person. All of the evidence that we've seen in the elections that we've had so far is that people are pretty amenable to that. So does anybody, I'll pull the chat back up, does anyone have any questions about that?
Mike, I have a question, and it's in regards to going and using the Express SOS online. It allows you to change your address, which is also supposed to change the address on your driver's license. But if you have not gotten a sticker for the address on your driver's license and you've received a new voter's card, what do you use for validation? Because the driver's license would be a previous address, but the voter's registration would say the current precinct.
Well, what you use for validation is what they put on their application to vote. As long as they are registered to vote in the electronic poll book in the proper precinct, which I believe is the scenario you're talking about, even if the driver's license address does not match that, it's irrelevant. If they're properly registered to vote, meaning they're in the electronic poll book, they're in the Michigan QBF at the proper address, and they write that address on their application to vote, the only thing you're using the ID for is for picture verification. If that address doesn't, if the address on the driver's license doesn't match, that's not your concern.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Okay. Provisional ballots I'm going to skip because while provisional ballots are still in existence, they're going to be used very sporadically, even more sporadically than they previously were. Provisional ballots were designed for someone who wasn't registered in the precinct to still have the opportunity to vote and then go kind of prove their registration after the fact. Again, with election day voter registration, provisional ballots, generally speaking, have become a thing in the past. If somebody isn't registered to vote, they can go take care of it right there on election day with their local city or township clerk and still be eligible to vote. So the next one video that I'm going to play is going to be election challengers. This is something definitely worth paying attention to. Challengers are fairly common in even year August primaries and November generals. So this is something that you may very well encounter.
Challenges. The law allows election challengers to monitor the election process. Challengers are appointed by political parties and qualified groups and must carry an identification from that group. A challenger must be a registered voter in the state of Michigan. The challenger may not be a candidate for any office in the election at that precinct. A challenger cannot approach voters or talk to voters for any reason. Challengers have the right to examine the voting equipment before the polls open and after the polls close. Observe each person offering to vote. Observe the processing of voters. Bring to the precinct board's attention the improper handling of a ballot by a voter or election inspector. That the 100-foot campaign restriction is being violated, or that any other election law or prescribed election procedure is being violated. Challengers can keep notes on the persons offering to vote, or keep notes on the election procedures being carried out and the activity of the precinct board. Remain in the precinct until the precinct board completes its work. Challengers can inspect but not touch the application to vote, the list of voters in the e-poll book, and any other materials used to process voters at the polling place. Also, challengers may not observe electors voting. Only one challenger representing a particular group will hold the authority to challenge at any given time. The challengers may alternate the authority to challenge and must advise the precinct board each time the authority is alternated. A challenger has the right to challenge a voter if a challenger has good reason to believe that a person who offers the vote is not qualified to vote in that precinct. For example, the voter is not a true resident in the city or township, has not yet attained 18 years of age, is not a United States citizen, and not qualified as a registered voter for that current election. Generally, such challenges are based on research conducted in advance of the election. In other cases, the voter may make a statement regarding his or her age, residency status, or citizenship status when offering to vote. How to challenge a voter. Challenges issued against voters must be directed to the chairperson or the appropriate election inspector of that precinct board before the voters issued a ballot. After the challenge is made, the challenged person takes the oath as read by the inspector. The inspector may question the challenged voter as to the areas of age, residency status, or citizenship status. A challenged voter is permitted to vote a specially prepared challenge ballot if the answers given under oath prove that he or she is qualified to vote in that precinct. A challenged voter may not vote if he or she refuses to take the oath, refuses to answer appropriate questions under oath, or is found to not be qualified to vote through the answers given under oath. A complete record of the challenge must be entered in the challenge voters page in the poll book. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, so a couple things to touch on there. Challengers are very common in the polling place. They must have credentials that were issued to them by the appointing authority. Most often we see challengers from the political parties who are there kind of monitoring who's voting and working on their get out the vote efforts. But they do certainly have the right and the authority to do all of the things listed in that video, to actually challenge an elector's right to vote, to monitor everything going on in the precinct, to bring things to the attention of the chairperson of the precinct board. So if anybody has worked elections before, you're probably somewhat familiar with challengers. They do differ from the term poll watcher, who is somebody just there viewing what's going on. They're not allowed to stand by. Poll watchers are not allowed to challenge anything. They're not allowed to stand behind the precinct table. They are not allowed to view everything to the extent that the challengers do. They don't have the rights and responsibilities of challengers. They're probably just people who are hanging around trying to get the results of the election as soon as possible after the polls close. But if you have any questions about what a challenger is doing, or a poll watcher for that matter, please contact your local clerk, because you don't want to have anything going on that shouldn't be. You don't want to prohibit anyone from doing something they're allowed to do, but at the same time, you don't want to allow them to do more than they're allowed to do. So, does anybody have any questions about challengers? Okay, we'll move on.
Checks and balances, quality control. As you administer the polls throughout the day, it is important to employ check and balance procedures provided under the law to protect the integrity of the elections process and remove any appearance of impropriety. The following tasks must be performed by 2 election workers of different political parties: offering instructions to voters after they have entered the voting station, assisting voters in marking their ballots, processing absentee ballots in the polling location, duplicating absentee ballots rejected by the tabulator after the polls have closed, recording write-in votes. One reads while the other records the votes, removing ballots from the tabulator bin before the polls have closed, sealing ballot containers, preparing and sealing the special envelopes for return, removing and sealing the tabulator program for return, delivering the ballot containers and envelopes to the local receiving board, correcting precinct canvass mistakes discovered by the receiving board, physical count of the ballots if the ballot summary does not balance. Monitoring throughout the day can help you stay on track and ensure quality and accuracy. Compare the number of applications to vote to the number of voters in the poll book and to the tabulator public counter to make sure your numbers match. If your numbers do not match, remember that you may have voters and ballots currently in the booths. Document any issues in the remarks section of the poll book. Include anything out of the ordinary. Identify who is making the remark. Include all relevant details. Ballot Jams. Refer to the guide for your specific voting system for detailed instructions on how to properly remove a jammed ballot from the tabulator. Keep in mind that jams may be caused by ballot backups or a voter not letting go at the proper time. When clearing a ballot jam, check for tabulator messages. Account for all of the ballots and compare to the public counter. Note if the ballot was counted or not. If the ballot counted, deposit the cleared ballot in the ballot bin. If the ballot was not counted, retabulate that ballot.
Okay, so a few things to touch on from that video. There are a number of tasks that need to be done by 2 inspectors of differing political parties. Basically, anytime that you are assisting a voter or dealing with the ballots, if you ever have to go into the ballot bin, if you ever have to assist a voter and marking their ballot, in answering questions. There's a whole variety of things. The whole point is just to always, number one, guard against impropriety, but even the appearance of impropriety. So if we have two inspectors of differing political parties, returning the ballots at the end of the night, returning the election materials, the envelopes, all those types of things, no one can claim that there was some sort of partisanship going on. The part in the middle of the video about balancing often throughout the day, we absolutely encourage that. Checking the number of applications to vote, the number of voters who have come through, the number of ballots that have been issued, and the number of ballots that have been tabulated. Those should all match, bearing in mind that you might have issued a ballot and a voter is still in the voting booth, so it hasn't been tabulated yet. But if you're ever at a point during the day where you don't have any voters and nobody, there's no voters coming through, there are no ballots currently waiting to be tabulated, absolutely check during that time to make sure everything balances. And even if you don't have that opportunity, we absolutely encourage you to check during the day and take into account ballots that have been issued but haven't been tabulated yet. Because if you do find that your count is off for some reason, it's a lot easier to try and figure out what happened and to correct that if you find the problem, 15 minutes or half an hour after it occurred, as opposed to 6 o'clock at night, 8 o'clock at night, you close everything up and find out your numbers are off, and try and have to figure out what happened and what caused it, when it may have been 10 hours ago at 10 o'clock in the morning. So we absolutely encourage you to balance your precinct as often as possible. Does anybody have any questions about that video?
What should happen if the numbers were off?
You need to try and figure out why. So that would, I would start with the applications to vote to see if that matches the number of voters in your poll book, because for every application to vote, somebody comes in and fills out the application to vote, you enter them in the poll book, those should match. If they don't, you have to try and figure out why. Did somebody fill out an application to vote and then not get issued a ballot for some reason? Did you forget to enter them in the poll book? I don't know. You need to figure out what happened there. If that matches, look at the number of ballots that you've, the number of voters in the poll book and the number of ballots that you've issued, and check that against the remaining ballots that you have in your possession. Does that add up? Look at the number of voters who have been issued a ballot and the number of ballots that have been tabulated that have actually gone through the tabulator. Again, bearing in mind that some voters may still be voting them and haven't tabulated. If that doesn't match up, what happened? Did you skip a ballot? Was there a package of ballots? Instead of, you get through your first 100 and instead of starting at 101, you accidentally grab the next package of ballots at 201. Or maybe the clerk didn't give you a package of ballots. But you need to figure out, to the best of your ability, what happened, accounting for all of the ballots. And ultimately, if you can't, you need to contact your clerk. Maybe they can figure something out, or there's something they can suggest that you check. And if you still can't figure it out, obviously voting needs to still continue. Make a remark in the poll book that at such and such time, you found that the count was off. The number of ballots issued didn't match the number of ballots tabulated, and make the remark in the poll book and just keep going. Ultimately, if you can't figure out what happened, do your best and just keep going. But that's why we advise for you to balance as often as possible, so that hopefully if you do come up with something that's out of balance, you'll have an easier time trying to figure out what happened, as opposed to, like I said, 10 hours later and you're grasping at straws. don't forget to include ballots that were spoiled. Yes, that is a good tip. As you're trying, if your count is off. Now, spoiled ballots, bear in mind, you may have a number of spoiled ballots for this election, but the number of ballots that you have that go through the tabulator should still match the number of voters. If you have a spoiled ballot, if you've issued, 2 spoiled ballots to a voter and then they finally get the third one right, even though that voter has touched 3 ballots, they have still only put 1 ballot or 1 voter through the tabulator. So there could be a number of spoiled ballots in your spoiled ballot envelope, but that could potentially explain the discrepancy. But you should still have, at the end of the day, 1 application to vote, 1 entry in the poll book for the voter, and 1 ballot that voter tabulated. That's ultimately what you're trying to balance. Any other questions? Okay. I'm going to skip the video about absent voter counting boards. Those can be run a little bit differently depending on how your clerk chooses to do so. So I will let your local clerk instruct you as to how that is supposed to work. You're certainly welcome to watch the video on your own if you choose. Just bear in mind that obviously these videos are generalities. The specific logistics and procedures and intricacies of how your clerk chooses to run his or her absent voter counting board is up to them, and will be up to them to tell you how they want that done. Okay. So now we're going to move on to a few different videos about closing the poll. So now we're at the end of the day, after all of the voters have gone through and all of the ballots have been issued, all the ballots have been tabulated. We are to the point where you're now closing the polls. Does anybody have any questions about anything that happens during election day? Okay.
Summary and poll book completion. After you are sure all ballots have been tabulated, including any late arriving absentee ballots or ballots that require duplication, begin completion of the 3 reports generated in the poll book. Start by performing one last backup, then move on to the ballot summary. Be sure to use the ePoll book manual for each of these final steps to ensure you do not miss anything. In the first section of the ballot summary, enter the starting and ending number of the ballots you started with at the beginning of the day. If you have more than 1 ballot style, simply use the Tab key to create a new line until you've entered the numbers for each style. If you processed absentee ballots in the precinct, enter the number of absentee ballots, including FOBs and move ballots, that were returned by voters for you to process. Do not include any absent voter ballots that were spoiled prior to Election Day or issued but not returned by the voter. Now start the next section. This section is an accounting of what happened to the ballots throughout Election Day. Start with the number of ballots tabulated. You'll get this number from the tabulator and enter it on line D. If you processed 80 ballots and any of the envelopes were empty, enter that number on line E. If the EPB was used properly throughout the day to account for spoiled, rejected, and envelope ballots, those numbers will already be completed for you. You cannot modify those numbers in the ballot summary. If there are errors, they'll need to be corrected within the appropriate voter record. Next, record the number of ballots you use for duplication, if any, on line H. Finally, enter the number of unused ballots in line J. The starting number is the number of the ballot you would use if 1 more voter were to have voted. What ballot number would you have given them? Then enter the ending number of your unused ballots. Repeat this step if you had more than 1 ballot style by hitting Tab to create a new line. In order for the ballot summary to calculate properly, you must hit the Tab key twice or put the cursor in a different box. Election inspectors forget this key step and often wonder why their ballot summary difference is off. Once you hit the Tab key twice or move your cursor into a different box, you should see the number 0 on line L. If you do not see a 0, that means your ballot summary does not balance, and you must do some troubleshooting to find out why. If the total number of ballots tabulated is less than the total number of voters recorded in the poll book, check the auxiliary bin for any remaining ballots that should be duplicated and/or tabulated. Verify that all absentee ballots have been tabulated. Go through all of the envelopes to ensure they are empty. Compare the applications to vote against the list of voters to ensure every voter and every ballot, including spoiled, were entered into the EPB correctly. Verify all spoiled ballots were recorded. If the steps above do not solve the discrepancy, contact the local clerk. If the total number of ballots tabulated is more than the total number of voters recorded in the poll book, first compare the applications to vote against the list of voters to ensure every voter and every ballot, including spoiled, were entered into the EPB correctly. If this does not solve the discrepancy, conduct a physical count of the ballots tabulated. All physical counts should be conducted by a team of 2 inspectors who have expressed a preference for different political parties. If the physical count is the same as the total number of voters as recorded in the poll book, the ballots must be retabulated. Contact the local clerk for instructions. If the physical count is more than the total number of voters as recorded in the poll book, do not retabulate the ballots. Make a complete record of the situation in the remarks page of the poll book. The ballot summary must balance unless there is a valid reason for the imbalance. A valid reason must be noted in the remarks section of the poll book to complete the record. Once the ballot summary is balanced, save and print it if printing in the precinct. Then save and print, if necessary, the list of voters and remarks report and save the voter history file. Once all of these items are saved, ensure they are all in the proper folder on the encrypted flash drive. Now proceed to the back page of the poll book. Complete the election inspector's completion certificate by recording the number of ballots tabulated, recording the number of envelope ballots and ensure that they are all properly sealed into the provisional ballot storage envelope, recording the number of voters according to the list of voters, verifying that the number of ballots tabulated plus provisional envelope ballots equals the number of voters, and if they do not and a valid discrepancy exists, a notation was made in the remarks section, verify completion and balancing of the ballot summary, and that if any of the following items occurred, they were properly recorded. All formal challenges, all absent voter ballots tabulated, all ballots duplicated and tabulated, and all valid write-ins tallied. Place a check mark in each box as the task is completed and verified. Then attach a signed tabulator totals tape to each of the 3 copies of the page. The tabulator tape with the 0 tape should be attached to the copy intended for the local clerk. Proceed to the seal verification section and record the seal number of the ballot container. Remember, the ballot container should only have the following items inside: used ballots, unused ballots, VAT ballots, spoiled ballot envelope, original ballot envelope. The provisional ballot storage envelope should not be placed inside of the ballot container. It should be returned individually with the envelopes used in the final steps. Be very careful when writing the ballot storage container seal number down. A person from one political party should record the number, and someone from another political party should review the number recorded. Transposing numbers is a costly mistake and may lead to a precinct not being able to be recounted. As you are recording this information in the poll book, also record the seal number on the ballot storage container certificate. Make sure the person sealing and the person verifying sign in the appropriate locations. If you are transporting a memory device from the tabulator or EPB to the receiving board, place them into their approved container and record that seal number in the poll book and on the transfer case certificate as well. As an alternative, memory devices may remain sealed in tabulators until the expiration of the security period, and the EPB flash drive may simply be placed in its own envelope under red paper seal for delivery to the local clerk. Once everything is sealed and the steps in the election inspector completion certificate are completed, all of the inspectors, including those that sealed and verified the sealing of the container, must sign under number 3, certifying completion of all of the closing steps. If you printed your reports in the polling location, place them into the appropriate sections of the poll book. Then, carefully remove the 2 extra copies of the statement of votes back page of the poll book. Place the local clerk copy with the tabulator tape attached to the 0 tape into the local clerk's envelope. Place the second copy with the tabulator tape attached in the envelope addressed to the Board of Canvassers. Repeat this step with the write-in statement of votes. Once complete, place the poll book into the envelope addressed to the county clerk. All envelopes should be sealed with a red paper seal. After packing up the remaining supplies and securing the voting equipment, return the sealed ballot container and 4 envelopes to the receiving board. Duplicating ballots. Some ballots.
Okay. Any questions about closing the polls? Okay. Duplicating ballots, I'm going to skip because that is most commonly a task for AB counting boards. We'll come back to that if we have time. But the odds of you having to duplicate a ballot in the precinct is pretty slim. For those of you, if you ever do have to do it, contact your local clerk and they can walk you through it. For those of you who are working in AB counting board, if there are any of you, definitely talk to your local clerk about that, the whole reader and checker, original one, duplicate one ballot, duplicating ballots and mistakes made during duplication is probably one of the most common errors, not that it happens often, but one of the more common errors that we see during canvassing. The actual marking of the ballot is generally correct. However, the labeling of the ballot, the original one and duplicate one, so that the duplicated ballot can be verified against the original, is most commonly the thing that we most commonly see mistaken. So duplicating ballots, again, for those of you who are working at AB counting board, please make sure that your local clerk goes over that. And if you have to do so in a polling place, contact your local clerk and they can walk you through it.
Counted for on the ballot summary and contained in the ballot container at the end of the night. This ensures all ballots are available in the event of a recount. Sealing and recording of the sealing of the container properly certifies that the election inspectors were the last to handle the official ballots. If the container can be opened, or if the seal number is not properly written down in the poll book and on the ballot container certificate, the integrity of the ballots inside that container is compromised, and that precinct is uncountable. To repeat, a ballot container that is not properly sealed makes your entire precinct unrecountable. Ballot container and seal types vary across the state, but no matter which approved seals or containers you use, you can ensure your precinct is recountable by verifying 3 things. 1, that all of the ballots, voted, unvoted, spoiled, and original, but not provisional on, are inside the container. 2, that the container cannot be opened in any way once sealed. 3, that the seal number is written properly both in the poll book and on the ballot container certificate. Let's review the mistakes often seen at recounts and how to check whether your container is properly sealed.
Whoops.
It's a 2-door container that we quite often have problems with properly sealing. It's not really.
Okay. We'll go into a few of those videos in just a moment. The Bureau has actually put together videos on a number of different containers. We'll go through the ones that are the most common and how to properly seal them and some of the more common mistakes that we see with them. But something I wanted to touch on under the sealing ballot containers video, we do, I won't say that we see it often, but we do see it at recounts where precincts are unrecountable, where the ballot container wasn't sealed properly, was sealed in a way that it could still be accessed, or if the seal numbers are not properly recorded on the ballot bag certificate and in the poll book. Recounts are kind of the ultimate backstop if there is some sort of, if a recount is requested, if there's some question about what happened on election day, if somebody feels that something was done improperly. That's why we use paper ballots in Michigan, because a recount can be conducted and ultimately make everybody feel confident that everything was done properly. If a precinct is unrecountable, then the election day results stand, and it reflects on everybody, on the election inspectors, on the city and township clerks, on the county clerk, everybody. When there's a precinct that's unrecountable, nobody's happy about it. So please take an extra few moments at the end of the night to make sure that your ballot container is properly sealed, that the seal numbers are properly recorded on the ballot bag certificate and in the poll book. Does anybody have any questions about that, about sealing ballot containers or anything like that? Okay, then we'll go on to watch a couple of videos the Bureau has put together about some of the more commonplace ballot containers and how to properly seal them.
In order for these to be approved, two-door container, we quite often have problems with properly sealing. It's not really a problem from the standpoint of election workers, but ahead of time by the clerk and deputies, this causes the problem. In order for these to be approved by county court canvassers now, what we've said is the back door, this is the half door that is covering a slot. This has to have a permanent seal on it. So we recommended using a horseshoe and a flat metal seal. This seal number is going to be recorded on a container certificate that is going to be attached to the front of the door. Just taped in there. Now, at the end of the day, you'll place your ballots into the full-sized side, the full-sized door. Close the door, properly latch it, and now any of a variety of seals will work adequately because all we're doing is preventing the latch from coming up. So we'll grab our container certificate on which the seal number has been properly recorded. We'll put our seal in using a padlock seal in this particular case. Press that down, make sure that the hook has been properly engaged, and now that seal will not come off. I cannot get the latch back up. This container is properly sealed. This is a newer type of container that we've
Actually, we'll watch that.
had some issues with. The way these are sealed, the zippers are supposed to interlock. And when they interlock, there is one eyelet that the zipper can go through, the seal can go through. What has happened in this particular case is instead of running through the inlet of the interlocking zippers, they've run the seal through the pull. As a result, there's about those zippers, length of the zippers themselves, plus whatever slats they have seal itself. So again, you're going to have enough room here to put ballots in or take ballots out with a little bit of effort. Proper use of this particular container. Number one, the eyelets at the end of the zippers need to be plugged. The state or the vendors are actually providing these plugs to us. One way is a pop rivet type mechanism. The other way is a shrink tubing type thing. You just put that over the zipper pulls. That is taking away the ability of election workers to use the wrong eyelets. And now, in this particular case, with the zippers completely pulled together, the seal has been run through that overlapping eyelet, and now we cannot open this container. So this is a properly sealed container. This particular container for your ballots should be fairly easy to use. A couple things to be aware of with this. The container certificate, your county court of canvass or approval certificate, can be placed in this window or on top of that, or inside the window, I should say. The seal number is going to be recorded on your container certificate, and then you need to go onto the inside of the bag, inside of the lid here, and slip that container certificate also in that window. Once you put it in like that, you'll be able to read the seal number as you should be able to do. And at this point, you simply are going to zip up the container. Key thing with this chamber sealing type mechanism is, notice the head of the zipper is going to be in this chamber. We have to make sure that chamber has been properly engaged. We have to make sure the back end fits in properly, and the front end of the zipper chamber should snap in place. Once that's in place, you have to make sure that this small plastic seal, number one, is right side up, and then number two is pushed into the point where that hook has engaged on the inside of this. At this point now, you cannot open this without first breaking that seal. This is now a properly sealed container.
All right. Well, I keep missing it.
Dealing with this old traditional.
I'm going to skip that one. I don't know of anybody using the metal ballot containers. There's one more that I wanted to show you. Again, bear in mind that there are a variety, as you can see, of approved ballot containers, and they vary from one community to another. There are even a few new ballot containers that I'm aware of that some clerks are using that are not covered in these videos. So if your clerk can ultimately teach you how to properly seal any ballot container, but if you have questions, especially if you're a new election inspector who hasn't done this before, number one, that duty, that requirement should not be left to someone who hasn't done it before, or at the very least, if you are, you should have received training on how to properly seal it. But if you have questions on how to properly seal any ballot container, ask your clerk, ask another election inspector. Because again, if the container is not properly sealed, if the seal is not properly engaged on the container, your precinct will be unrecountable. That is something that should be checked and caught by your receiving board when the presumably the chair and the vice chairperson, assistant chairperson, co-chair, whatever you want to call them, or whoever takes everything back to the receiving board on election night, they should be looking at your poll book, your documentation, making sure everything is filled out properly, making sure that your ballot summary balances, making sure everything was signed, and making sure that your ballot container was properly sealed. If not, they can address it at that point and have you reseal it if necessary. But if you do everything properly in the precinct, they can just confirm that it was done properly at the receiving board and hopefully won't have to fix anything. So even if you do make a mistake, there is a chance to correct it and double check. But we're all human, we all make mistakes. So the receiving board could potentially miss it. So we encourage you to do everything in your power to make sure that the container is properly sealed when you leave the precinct.
It's really pretty simple. The killer container has a zipper lock mechanism on it. You can see in this particular case, the election worker has attached their container certificate, they've run the seal through a grommet on the top, and then through the eyelet on the zipper itself. This may look reasonably well sealed. You'll notice that it doesn't really attach to anything securely. As a result, you're able to open this zipper quite a ways. You're able to open this container up at this point enough to put ballots in, take ballots out. And ultimately, I could open this all the way. So you can see with a little bit of work, I have been able to open this up enough so that I can put ballots in, take ballots out, whatever nefarious activity I want to engage in. To properly seal this container, it's really pretty simple. I'm going to take the old seal off. I have to change the seal number on our container certificate. The important thing to understand with this particular type of container is that there is a little peg on the bottom of the zipper pull. And that zipper pull has to be kept in a down position in order to seal up this particular container. So with that zipper over this eyelet, I'm going to run my seal through the eyelet. And then just because I wear suspenders with my belt, I'm going to run my seal also through that grommet as well. Not really necessary, but it's another layer of security that's not going to hurt. My container certificate on there. And now I'm going to properly seal this. Again, draw it up reasonably tight, but not excessively tight. And now this is a properly sealed
container. Okay. Why does it keep doing that? Okay. So those are the most common type of ballot containers. As I said, there are also a few new ones out there on the market being used. If anybody has any questions about how to properly seal a container, please contact your clerk. Ask another election inspector who's done it before. It is not common for us to see in a properly sealed container, but I don't know if I've done a recount yet where every container has been perfect. So our goal is always to have all containers be recountable at the end of an election. As I said, it just reflects poorly on everybody if that's not the case. So at that point, or at this point, are there any questions about anything, about sealing the containers or about anything we've gone over or anything that we haven't gone over? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Hey, do the machines shut off at a certain time automatically, or do we shut them off at the closing of the polls?
Sure, great question. No, the machines do not shut off automatically. They are constantly on. They will never shut off. At the end of the night, once all of your voters have come through, once you are certain there are no more voters left to vote, once you're certain there are no voters left in the voting booths, that all necessary ballots have been tabulated, that everything balances. That is something, actually, you bring up a good point, something that reminded me. We have had instances where poll workers sometimes get a little overzealous, and when 8 o'clock hits, they look and don't see anybody in line, and they go over to the tabulator and close the polls, but there are still people in the voting booths voting. So before you close the polls on election night, please be sure that all of your voting booths are empty, that there's no voters left, there's no voters' ballots left to be tabulated. So to answer your question, yes, you do have to actually close the polls. When you open up the DS200, the sealing chamber where the memory card is stored, there are two buttons there. One says power, one says close polls. So once you're ready, using the key, you'll open up that container, open up the locked compartment, push down the close polls button. You have to hold it for a second or two, and then the screen will start going through the closed polls procedure. It does ask you to confirm. I don't remember the exact message, but you're trying to close the polls. Are you sure that's what you want to do? So you have a chance, if you push that button prematurely and there are still voters left or still ballots to be tabulated, you can change your mind. Even after that point, if you do confirm, yes, I want to close the polls, there is a way to open it back up. You can contact your clerk and they can walk you through that. But the easiest way is just to, again, make sure that you have everything properly tabulated, everything balances before you close the polls.
Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
Are we gonna have a cheat sheet like to follow, you know, for opening and closing?
Sure. I can't tell you that. The training, there are so many idiosyncrasies to how each community wants you to do it. Most communities, I don't want to speak for every clerk, but most communities do provide you additional documentation, checklists, a chart, a cheat sheet, something with how to open the polls, how to close the polls, what buttons to push, picture guide, whatever it is that they may provide. Most clerks do that. I can't speak for every individual clerk, but that would be a question to ask your local clerk.
Okay.
And we would certainly encourage them to do so. Anything else? Okay. At this point, I've gone through everything I want to. If everybody can, actually, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but the training will end. If everybody can stay in the training room and allow me to take attendance one last time just to make sure I get everybody, I would appreciate that. Should just take me a minute. And during that time, if anybody thinks of any other questions, by all means, shout them out.
I will just say in answer to that previous question, Bruce Township does have a very detailed step-by-step process. So.
Okay, wonderful. Okay. Okay, so at this point, I have the attendance taken. Thank you very much. I'll be distributing that to the city and township clerks. That will be their proof that you did indeed attend the training today. If there are any last questions, feel free to ask. I'll stick around for a minute or two. Other than that, thank you very much for your time. We appreciate it and your patience with some of the technological issues today. Good luck on election day. And if you think of anything after this training is over, feel free to contact your local clerk and they can give you direction.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.
Is there a way we can assure that we're on this, or can we see ourselves somewhere?
I don't quite understand. Assure that you're on what?
On your list.
That's, you are. What's your name, sir?
Lawrence Latouf. And my wife is Rita Latouf.
Yep, I've got both of you on here, and we'll be distributed because I don't know what community you're working for, so we'll send all of the the entire attendance list to all of the clerks, and they can pick out their particular ones.
Okay, great. Thanks for all your help.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir.